Welcome to Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Whether you're tuning in for the first time or you're a regular listener, I'm so glad you're here. My goal is to connect you with the visionary leaders and bold thinkers who are shaping our future. And today's conversation promises to be a very insightful one with Trisha Wyman. Trisha Wyman is the Director of Business Intelligence and Research at Parlay Finance. She's a retired Army officer and experienced leader in psychological and special operations, and she continues to consult on these areas. Trisha has led and supported operations and research focused on cyber-enabled influence, intelligence, counterproliferation, and cognitive warfare. She brings deep expertise in developing and applying innovative technical systems for influence operations supported by operational experience and mixed methods research. Her work has been supported organizations including the Center for Global Security Research at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, the U.S. Department of State, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and multiple combatant commands. She has also lectured at institutions such as the Middlebury Institute of International Studies and the University of Arizona's Intelligence and Information Operations programs. In addition to her professional work, Trisha is authoring the Naturalist Guide to Fort Bragg, an in-progress book project approved by the U.S. Army that highlights the ecology, wildlife, and natural landscapes of the installation and surrounding areas. With over 20 years of military experience in global assignments, Trisha combines strategic insight with real-world operational experience. She holds a bachelor's degree in global studies, political science concentration from Methodist University, a master of professional studies in security and safety leadership from the George Washington University, and a master of science and information strategy and political warfare from the Naval Postgraduate School. She's also a member of AFCEA International. I am so excited to welcome Trisha. She's someone I really look up to and have had the amazing opportunity to collaborate on projects in the past. And so thanks so much, Trisha, for coming on Tipping Spears.
Thank you for the invite, Hannah.
So can you start us off today by telling us where your story begins?
Yeah, so grew up small town kid in Auburndale, Florida. It used to be very rural. It was like oranges and cows. Like there wasn't much more than that. And matter of fact, our high school had probably a dozen cities, probably close to it, of kids attending high school from surrounding areas. So, but now it's exploded. Like now I hear from friends they're going to Margaritaville in Auburndale, Florida. I'm like, what? There's a Margaritaville where I'm from? So it's grown exponentially since I left. But so I grew up in a small town with my family, and I loved the outdoors, sports. I was huge in tennis. As I'm a bit of a tomboy. I loved it, like just running around, playing with neighborhood kids. I lived in Florida my whole life up until I joined the Army. And I really, that was the only place I knew before I joined the Army. So the Army was a cultural awakening, I guess you could say, in a lot of ways. So yeah.
What sparked your interest in joining the Army?
Yeah, this is another great question because I don't have any elaborate story about, this family member and that
Mhm.
family member. I had some that were in the military, World War II, for instance, but I can't say that they were as influential on that decision to join. I actually asked them more stories post joining the military because
Yeah.
at that point I was super fascinated and I better understood it, right? But it was a bit more unconventional. I played Desert Strike, which was influenced by the Gulf War video game, right? And then my mom did take me to a trip to visit one of her friends up in Troy, North Carolina, of all places, which is only like 45 minutes from where I live now. And I was like, I don't know, maybe 13, 14, something around this age. And basically, her friend took us to Fort Bragg to see the fort. And so this is
Wow.
my first introduction to Army. It's like straight, directly like, hey, we're on a military base. And so I bought my first camouflaged outfit, my BDUs, which ironically, a couple of years later, I ended up joining and getting issued the same BDUs.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was that was influential, I think, visiting that. And I wanted some more discipline.
Mhm.
I did great when school. I was a great tennis player. My family was a bit put back by the fact that I was joining the army and not taking a tennis scholarship. So that was a bit you know, a bit chaotic at first, joining the military, and my family was just like, how could you give up a tennis scholarship, a full ride, right? And I think I probably would have ended up on a full ride at one of the
Mhm.
schools in North Carolina anyways, because that was where the scouts were hitting me pretty hard from. But and they got after my family got over that after some time,
Mhm.
right? Because they see that, I'm enjoying myself, I'm learning, I'm getting all these benefits, and I'm experiencing things that most people will never experience,
Mhm.
maybe at the most in various capacities, maybe 10% of our population in the US, right, will ever see places like this and do things like this and challenge themselves like this, right? So my family eventually started to appreciate that. But ultimately, yeah, I wanted a life that challenged me, and this totally did this.
So was there a particular event or person that served as a catalyst for your career?
Uh, you know, in the beginning, it was self-driven decision essentially.
Yeah.
Like I kind of mentioned that joining the army, right? But I've met a lot of great, not just military leaders, but other leaders in national security that really guided me a lot. I always have to mention Karen Williams. She's my hermana, as you could say. One of the first languages the Army taught me was Spanish, and I was really good Spanish speaker at the time. Probably
Mhm.
not so much now. I've
Mhm.
got some funny jokes about that, but I'll save those. And later, I had to learn Arabic, and that's its own difficulty, right? But my first deployment to Paraguay, in South America, I met Karen Williams, who at the time, she was the third in charge at the embassy. And she really took me under her wing. And subsequently, she ended up being the POLAD for SOCOM. She had been ambassador multiple times. And eventually, I actually was able to opt into another. It was my second Afghanistan trip. I opted in to serve in a capacity that I was adjacent to her. So we got to be in Afghanistan on a deployment together again. Um, but she really helped me navigate not just, you hear the typical mentorship where it's,
Mhm.
focused on army and military, right? Like, but she very much was influential in whole life approach to things. So I appreciate her for that. She calls me Hermanita and she's my hermana. So, to this day, so that's 21 years ago, we met. And, people like her, yeah, I don't think there's been anyone like her, but I have had other people who have really helped me accomplish a lot in my career. And I think we could talk about this bit later, when it comes to like getting out of the army and how influential and important those people are still, right? And then making more people to help continue being a catalyst, right? With whatever you choose next, right? I think that's extremely important for us. We all need a support network.
Yeah. Yeah, having somebody who can help you navigate, what's unknown to you, the uncertain can make a world of difference.
Yes.
So I know every journey, has its hurdles. What were some of the biggest obstacles that you faced in your career and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So, I think one of the biggest ones was delaying family, right?
Mhm.
That's hard. Like I really wanted a family, but at the same time, I love the army and I
Yeah.
love the army mission. And so that can be difficult. I think it was challenging too to be in leadership positions, and old army policy wasn't as friendly as it is now,
Mm.
as soldiers. So there was a point where, you know, straight face, still trying to be supportive, having to counsel soldiers, like, hey, you just had a child, but 30 days later you have to leave and you have to have a family care plan. So not only the fact that I'm trying to navigate this on my own, I have soldiers, looking to me to support them in this dilemma that was posed inherently within Army operations, right? So, fortunately now I've got a wonderful husband and we are still on that journey together. And it's been a relief.
Mhm.
And he's very supportive. And we're both in our healing journeys, as I like to say. But yeah, it's a lot to overcome because you got to stop yourself from questioning if you ever did the right thing, right? Because
Mhm.
I had an amazing career. I have two awesome stepkids, great kids. But it was hard, right? Um, I'd say too, like I had a chronic hip injury that happened
Mhm.
on deployment in 2013. That was problematic. I don't know a single person in the military who has been unscathed from some sort of physical injury or even mental injury,
Mhm.
essentially. We all experience it. And for mine, I had this hip injury for 10 years and they couldn't diagnose it. They were just, like, hey, let me stick some needles in you here or there, some steroids here and there. And oh, you can't do this, you shouldn't do
Mhm.
that. But not getting my hip fixed. And that took a huge mental toll because I'm
Mhm.
navigating pain, trying to complete all the ruck march and the
Mhm.
events. Chronic stress on top of it. My hormones were just, tanked with all the stress. And, another obstacle and was I got asked to put my name in a hat for this weapons commander position. And in my mind, and I was at DIA at the time, and I really enjoyed my position at DIA. Such a creative team
Mhm.
doing research and implementing stuff on the fly. I mean, the tech, it's just awesome, right? And being able to, very in austere operations, basically remotely having this impact was a huge deal. So going from that to having someone ask me to put my name in a hat for a foreign weapons commander, I was like, okay. I was caught off guard. And full disclosure, I had imposter syndrome. I was
Mhm.
like, they're asking me to put my name in a hat for this? Like, okay. Like, all right, you know what? I'm up for a challenge. And yeah, I ended up I got the position. Even though I doubted myself, I totally doubted myself. No, I actually enjoyed weapons and weaponry, and I have a lot of weapons still now. I don't use them as much. I have switched in retirement mode. I shoot more with a camera,
There you
especially
go.
especially for the book, than firing my weapons. Even my husband probably hasn't seen me fire a weapon much. We've gone hunting together a few times. But then, I was still love like going to the range and all this stuff. And so I really connected with the team. That was the best, that was the some of the best guys and gals that I had worked with. And I really felt part of a team, you know. Again, like I said, I was my own worst, you know, advocate at the beginning thinking, oh gosh, is it really going to turn out that well? I don't know. But it did. It turned out exceptionally well. And I did well at the job because I was not only, I had to go through my own course, before being accepted to become commander. Can't have the weapons commander not understanding all these Soviet era weapons, right?
Mhm.
But also not just in the training, I was engaged in doing some of the policy stuff like essentially asking the Army for funding for this course, whether it be SOCOM funds, but also Army funds. And so I navigated that process for the company as well, to, plan out 4, 5, 6 years out. And so I was juggling a bit, but it was totally worth it in the end. And even though I say it's a big obstacle, I think the biggest obstacle, Hannah, was me getting over my own insecurities going into the job. Because it turned out great. I really didn't want to leave this job.
Mhm.
Like there's something amazing about like training soldiers, and you're
Mhm.
outside a lot, and it's
Mhm.
black and white. Either you can fire a weapon or you can't. Either you can assemble it or you can't. You know, it's fairly simple. And teaching the Guardian Angel program too. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but basically it provides an opportunity for these soldiers who are going to go train host nation and partner nation
Mhm.
on these weapons. But Guardian Angel is a way to that those soldiers, whether it be a company or whatever that unit is, they will designate a person who's the guardian angel, and they will maintain eyes on everything going on the range. That's their sole responsibility. Make sure there's no, attacks from our
Mhm.
partners, essentially. And that was very rewarding because there's a lot of success from that. And I mean, there's like it's sad stories to hear about these things happening, right? So that was a huge deal for me, getting over that. And then I went to Naval Postgraduate graduate school right after that. I kind of wanted to stay, but I knew it was time to go on and do something else. So yeah, those were my biggest obstacles turned silver lining in the end. Thankfully, I had hip surgery, and that hip does not bother me now.
That's good to hear.
Yes, it took like 10 years to figure it out. I
Yeah.
finally had a doctor at Duke, of all places, was like, "You've been doing the wrong thing the whole time." And I'm like, "Oh, no wonder I'm experiencing all this pain." So yeah, like thankfully, that was a challenge in itself going through hip surgery during the job, like
Mhm.
going through that because my command essentially it was like they always knew they could put me in these difficult positions, no matter if it's, go from DIA to a weapons commander, no big deal, or, go from, this to that, or, support the CG and this and that. And I had finally got to the point I had to take a knee. And the team was like, we will support you in taking that knee. And so it was at that point I was gonna retire. So that was an obstacle too, I guess you could say, because I
Mhm.
didn't want to yet. Here
Yeah.
I was still doing great, right? I wanted to keep on going.
Yeah.
But my body and mind had other plans. It was like, no, no, no. You're gonna go forward. You're not doing this. No more. We're not gonna pick ourselves up anymore. I'm like, okay, all right, I guess this is it. So to put it lightly. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So, Trisha, I know years ago we initially connected over your research on disinformation. I remember you had this great stuff post with Army War College, and I read it. I found it, and I was like, I got to meet this lady. She's really smart, and she's hitting the nail on the head of this. Back then, it was a pretty new topic, at least as far as like Americans were tracking. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your work in psychological operations?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll go back to the basics of how I got started,
Yeah.
kind of talk through my career. I have been titled the Queen of Unconventional Paths. As you could probably extrapolate from the stories I was just telling you. But going into PSYOP from high school even, I was super interested in psychology. I was probably going to end up doing some sort of psychology something to begin with, no matter what. So joining the army at the time, I joined, and back then you could come in off the street. There was no assessment selection. You just go into PSYOP branch, whether you're active duty or you were reserves. And so that was 2001. And I actually joined before 9/11, which makes things interesting, right? So I was in basic training during 9/11, and it was chaos. Like we didn't know what was going on. We just saw drill sergeants running around, saying things, and we only knew so much. And it wasn't until getting to advanced individual training that I think we realized, like, wow, this is really kicking off, right? So, but with influence, essentially, I had multiple deployments. So I went to Paraguay, that did teach me Spanish. I went to Paraguay. I was doing um, support to the embassy there primarily, but counter drug, counter
Mhm.
piracy. They have a lot of those issues in the tri-border area. I've also done PSYOP work in Afghanistan. You know, I have a separate Afghanistan trip with the 82nd. I was XO there, but I was focused on mostly resupply and personnel. But my second time in Afghanistan, I was focused on rewards for justice, supporting Department of State with their influence, right? Like, hey, we want someone to report on where these bad guys are and these terrorists. So we supported with that because they don't always have the skills and understanding with that, right? Um, and then also being able to advise and help craft influence for the Defense Intelligence Agency. That was really, really, quite an awakening for me to see how easy, at one point it was basically, hey, if it's going to save a life, don't ask permission.
Mhm.
Just do it. And that was different. That was a bit different for me, having to start off from the very beginning of my career where, there's not a lot of paperwork involved, in trying to get a plan approved at the time. You relied heavily on just getting stuff locally approved at the embassy for influence for PSYOP, versus, if you look 10, 15 years later, you have to go through multiple echelons to get anything approved now. And that's like our biggest issue, right? Is waiting for things to get approved. And I think that continues to be a challenge. But so these were like significant points in my career, like being able to actively influence, nation building. Uh, we think of PSYOP as, like spooky, like
Mhm.
right. That's what Americans think. What's that movie with men who stare at goats?
Mhm. Yep.
Right? A lot of people here, like have this like cliche or like alternate idea of what we are and what we do, but influence can be tied into so many different things. Like even the idea of supporting partner nation, right, and jumping out of airplanes with them, or helping influence their success and their confidence and making them feel good with the cooperation we are conducting with them, right? So um, that was a really cool experience jumping out of airplanes. Not what you typically get for PSYOP personnel, but nonetheless, pretty cool experience. Now, when it comes to the rest of my research that I think you came across, I had found this fascination. As we go through understanding everything going on around us, some of the different aspects of academia or government offices, civilian sector even, can often have a very myopic idea of influence. And when I got to the point of naval postgraduate school, I had just came from that weapons course, teaching Soviet era weapons, and at the same time, I had done some other writing in regards to understanding the dynamics in Afghanistan, right? So that leads me to think a lot about Russia, right? And so
Mhm.
that really drove my interest in trying to learn more about this dynamic and the problem at hand. So, with that being said, with Naval Postgraduate School, that research, I really made it a goal to harness all these different aspects of influence and study because I think it's critical. And I know we'll get to some what's the best stuff to read about, right? So I won't say too much there, but really tying those together with something that's not a precedent. So pulling from sociology fields, history fields, technical fields of open source research, right? Social media, counterproliferation. You've got proliferation wonk or counter CP wonks are going to think of things different than someone who's thinking about targeting on social media. And so there's a lot in common, one comparison I make in my research, because I mean, you've read this multiple times in the research, but basically looking at, the Russia's use of social media to influence with their security strategy and influencing U.S. policy, essentially, when it comes to counterproliferation, all these things, right? A great comparison I love to point out when people are like, oh, things are so different. I'm like, okay, well, Reagan was, hot mic at a certain point, right, during the Cold War. It's no different than Trump having a cold, mic talking about a big red button, right? Like these are similar things, similar problems, and we just have different ways of having to deal with it, It doesn't mean it's right. I'm not saying it's right, but there's a lot of, correlations that can be made, and then difference, obviously, because technology is very different. So I really enjoyed that. I also had thinking about the hat I wore at Defense Intelligence Agency and had that hat on for a lot of this research, and navigating that. So and it became very popular because, like you said, no one had really uh, you know, tapped into this subject yet. And so it was very popular subject once I started talking about this. Um, yeah, I think what's also very interesting about influence, and I kind of touched on this a bit previously, but with the foreign weapons course, for instance, too, which I loved, and I'll say that over and over again. When they went down range, one really awesome example to see as an outcome and being able to hear this, how it had an impact is so one of the Soviet era rifles for snipers that we trained them on was the SVD. So we had some soldiers who went through our training, they went down range to Iraq, and they taught the local police on this SVD sniper rifle and had a very positive impact. I mean, sniping out, killing multiple terrorists, Islamic fighters, that it had a local and regional impact. And so this was like really, it hit the media. And so media picked up the story about this Iraqi sniper. It's its own hero's journey, right? It's great to hear this. And this is a positive influence and builds the morale of the local populace. Like, hey, we have a champion. We have a hero who's leading us through this journey, for instance. And it gives motivation, and it felt, it also, like, someone for me, it's like, hey, this is great. This is like the full circle of my work as a weapons commander. It's really achieving great effects. Like, not only are they taking out the enemy, but we're getting it amplified in a very positive way. And that's a beautiful thing when it comes to, like, not just operations, but seeing a host nation try and, succeed and influencing actually playing out, right? So I
Oh, I know
don't
that.
know what else to say on that subject. I could keep rambling.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Really made it come to life, not just stuff on a screen in a bunker. So
Right?
yeah. Trisha, what are your top concerns, about national security now? Like, what keeps you up at night? What worries you? What do you think about when it comes to national security?
Yeah, I think that you know, besides the fact we have internal political division,
Hmm.
like and this is both parties, like but both parties are at fault, and like it's its own issue, and it slows policy, right?
Hmm.
Weakens our strategy. It's I think there's unknown threats out there.
Hmm.
And I think that you know, part of our issue is, maybe also having technology and implementing technology that we don't fully understand the effects of, whether not just be short term, but long term. Whether that be, something like a Havana syndrome weapons
Hmm.
system, so I could say, in simple terms, or AI. And it's not to scare people. It's just that, hey, we're having to move at such a fast pace. What's going to give in the future, right? It would be a great follow-up discussion, Hannah, when it comes to, I know with some of the stuff we wrote about, we talked
Hmm.
about system one and system two thinking, right?
Hmm.
Well, now there's an argument for a tri-system theory, and that's to say holding AI accountable. And that AI, because everyone goes to AI for decision making at this point, it seems,
Yeah.
that there's a responsibility to allow AI to best protect people when they're searching for these answers, and how, who takes that responsibility, for instance, who should have that responsibility? And how is AI going to always be right? You can fool AI. We work with AI a lot in my job, my current job,
Hmm.
like our platform's AI.
Hmm.
And thankfully it's at a very limited scale. And it's very tailored to our
Hmm.
customers. Like there's no doubt, and we have guardrails within the system. So there's no concerns when it comes to protecting data, protecting decisions. It's based off their credit policies. It's very focused, right? But when you call out getting some of these larger, like, people using ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all these things, right? Just grabbing everything on the internet,
Hmm.
it becomes a concern. So those are the things I think about that kind of keep me awake at night is, how's this next? How can I protect myself? Yeah, I've been fooled before on stuff like, hey, is this AI generated or not? Like, and then it's like, gosh, it is AI generated. Or, I find out like, oh gosh, why would I believe this? Like, we're just as caught in the middle as everyone else, the experts
Hmm.
on influence, right? And I think that's part of it is people have to maintain a personal responsibility of like, hey,
Hmm.
don't blame other people for you making that
Hmm.
error, spend some time. Yeah, we make mistakes in our decisions, but think about it and all these different perspectives. So yeah, our biggest
I
vulnerability is internal, and all these weapons and AI and everything, and figuring that out.
Yeah. I really appreciate your emphasis on kind of personal responsibility. It's like we've got all this new tech. None of us know how it's going to turn out. I mean, we can hypothesize, and we can, say we've got these credentials and based on this, but in reality, we're really not sure. So,
Right.
yeah. So I really appreciate your emphasis on kind of the responsibility of, adjusting course when we find out that something needs some guardrails. Maybe they're not there,
Yeah.
or in the impacts on humans, because it's not just staying, in kind of the cyber domain here. AI is impacting, like you mentioned. I mean, people are essentially delegating many aspects of their own decision making to AI, and then be like, oh, well, it told me to do that. You know, it's like, I don't have the responsibility. Let me just push this off onto this crazy new technology. We have no idea how, well, we can't even conceptualize the magnitude and scope of this. So it's so refreshing to hear your take on it. I think that's very applicable to people today, um, as they kind of dive off into the deep end of new technologies.
Right? Oh yeah, absolutely.
So today you're the business intelligence and research director at Parlay Finance, a loan intelligence system. Can you tell us, about your work in this space, kind of what y'all do or what you do and how all that goes?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll give you a little bit of an overview what Parlay is, so there's no confusion. So yeah, we are an intake system for small business lending that helps lenders get more deals done faster. We call ourselves a loan intelligence system, so we branded ourselves on this. This is a new brand. Bankers are very understanding of loan origination systems, something that's been around for a really long time now. If you go and get a loan, a lot of people, everyone's familiar for the most part about the underwriting process and how much these packets are huge for getting a loan for like a mortgage, for instance.
Mhm.
Well, it's no different in the business lending realm, right? Have these huge packets to put forward, especially when it's government guaranteed lending, like SBA loans. We help in that very initial front stage. We make it more efficient, organizing documents, having consistency, providing real quick 60 seconds or less an AI analysis of this applicant that's consistent every time you get an applicant, and then being able to look across all your business products, commercial business, whether SBA loan, business credit card, and tell you as a lender what's the best product for that applicant. So, because applicants will come to you as a lender and they would need the money. That's really all they need. They don't necessarily know what kind of loan, right? I know me, thinking about navigating a house loan, you're
Mhm.
thinking, I don't know what kind of loan I need. I just need a loan, right? Like, and then you get stuck with a VA loan if you're military most of the time, right? But there's a lot of other options that people should be aware of. And the same is for business, right? And so we make it such an efficient process that the whole, closing that deal could go from 4 weeks to 4 days, possibly, and being able to push it forward for underwriting. So that's a huge deal. Yeah, that's how we differentiate ourselves from loan origination versus what we do, loan intelligence. So my role specifically, so for in business intelligence and sales as well, not just research. My it's the team was small at first, right? So it's the three co-founders, Alex, Jay, and James, and I came on board as employee number one. I knew Jay actually in some innovation networks that we have and that we run for the Army, but for the military at large. And he's like, hey, he was also familiar with my work, Hannah. He's like, could you
Mhm.
do this with Parlay? And I was like, well, probably to some degree, probably could. I basically did a internship and they asked me to stay on. And we have doubled our size at the team now in the 2.5 years that I've been with the team. But my position, you know, I love how I've been able to hand off, like continue my skills in influence and
Mhm.
research, because now, as with every case, whether it's in military operations and planning, there's always that beginning of you have to research and figure out,
Mhm.
like what's the environment, right? And who are the audiences and who are the targets, right? And so that's what I do. I'm looking at bank and credit union asset sizes, what kind of lending activity, their efficiency ratios, what kind of tech they employ. And I translate insights into clear narratives for banks as well. It was a challenge, for sure, coming from Army. Luckily, I had enough civilian experience with the volunteering efforts I've done
Mhm.
in various capacities, like the lab and other volunteer stuff and mentoring, um, that I had less of a struggle, I think, than a lot of other people when they transition. And it Parlay's been a very supportive team. Our CEO is military spouse, and both Jay and James are also Army. I mean, technically, Jay is still Army Reserves,
Mhm.
and he's still doing some awesome stuff for the Army and SOCOM. And actually, the rest of our team are all military veterans,
Oh, wow.
with the exception of only one developer, and he's awesome too. So it's great because we all understand, for the most part, that
Mhm.
dynamic. But like I was saying with the research, so I do all this research, but I also identify the pain points, right, of these audiences. So, in influence, we look at target audiences, and it's no different in other capacities in like sales and marketing if you're doing it
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
You're gonna call them slightly different things, right? Like in this world now, it's like marketing perspective, it's more so like ideal customer profile or ideal customer personas, would you call it, like ICP. And that's who you're targeting essentially. And so I help identify those pain points, figuring out like which of these banks have these inefficiencies and need help with that. Because we don't want to try to influence people who don't have the capacity to change and
Mhm.
because that gets us nowhere. And it's the same thing in military operations. Only going to have, you only want to target the people who have the ability to change that behavior that you need changed. And it's the same way in civilian sector. Like that doesn't change. Um, I Besides that, I also handle some of our search engine optimization, make sure our website is, you know, positioned for the right traffic. I monitor our inbound and outbound leads as well. Some marketing, email marketing and stuff like that. Cold outreach. It's rather boring in case you didn't know. It has a very low turnaround rate to get leads to respond to your emails in case you had no idea, Hannah.
Will not be volunteering for that anytime soon.
Right? Yes. And, I funny, I joke around with people with my husband. I was like, I never imagined myself doing sales, but with Parlay, it's not just sales. You have to think of it beyond sales. And I've came to learn that in the DoD, the whole idea of sales is it's not really the most efficient, proper. I never had any not that I was paying that much attention to how the contractors were trying to sell products to us, but I was totally that audience that they were trying to
Mhm.
sell to for a long time, especially like the last like when I was doing the cyber and innovation stuff, and that was very influential. Like I still talk to that whole network. I mean, that's like,
Mhm.
an informal network of like thousands of people now. I never knew it'd grow that big, but it is. And so, I was totally the target of like, hey, can we get this product in front of you? And
Yeah.
maybe we can get this as a contract. And like, at one point, the CG would actually come to me and say, what's the difference between all these things? Here I am, find myself briefing the CJ, and I'm like, hey, this and that, and this and that. And so I have like a distaste for sales. I'm like,
Mhm.
because, most people do. Because you think of
Mhm.
like door-to-door salespeople, and I did not
Mhm.
want to do that. But with Parlay, it's very targeted, and we are like literally reaching out to institutions who need and can use our product. And there's a lot to benefit from that. And so I don't feel like any guilt in my job of reaching out because when I reach out to someone, that institution inherently needs a solution, and it's a matter of whether those personalities in the institution recognize it or not to some degree, right? Or if they've already found another solution and not implemented. There's a lot of, aspects of it, but so that's a key piece of all this. So I like the way my job is defined. And it's always changing. I mean, my neuroplasticity must be extremely great, Hannah, because going from army to jumping into banking, fintech, I never imagined that. I'm running our HubSpot, CRM, like I'm doing all these things I mentioned, pulling open source data
Mhm.
sets and looking at how that compares and building profiles. Like, it's it's awesome. And so my brain must have all these new pathways. But I do love that. So yeah, I mentioned supporting our digital growth, being able to support with my influence expertise. I love that. And I had the background and I've been able to apply that, right? So I love that I can turn the data stories, that I find into, help driving decisions. So yeah, um, I'll leave it at that.
It's fascinating to hear kind of how your experiences in the military have kind of shaped and positioned you well, kind of in this civilian path. It's y'all are really solving problems for your clients.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that our company aims to unlock more capital access for small business.
Mhm.
There's a huge sense of purpose that comes with that
Yeah.
because, in the Army, you go from having a mission and trying to accomplish that mission. A
Hmm.
lot of people lose that. They get stuck in that identity, right?
Hmm.
And they can't get away from it and they have a hard time finding a new identity. But with Parlay, it's been great to be able to not just be around other veterans, but be a part of that mission to try
Hmm.
to unlock that capital access. Like, yeah, we're helping banks and lenders like
Hmm.
improve their efficiency and, be more cost effective with how they do it. But ultimately, we want these US businesses to get the capital they need and not to be rejected in the beginning of the application time. So there's a lot of sense of purpose with that.
Yeah, y'all are funding, the backbone of American economy, small businesses, which, so many of the financial institutions, it's not a priority or it's so inaccessible for entrepreneurs. Like you said, 4 months to get or 4 weeks to get an application reviewed. And it's just so cool how y'all are tackling that challenge and kind of bridging the gap.
Yeah.
So Trisha, do you have any kind of career advice or any recommendations, books, organizations for anyone who's kind of interested in, pursuing a career like yours? So whether that's, in defense or if they're, transitioning out of the service, just kind of what made a difference to you? What made a difference in your career path?
Yeah, I think a big one is staying open-minded. Don't keep a foot in the back in the old room where the door's open. Like make sure you try to some degree close that door. Like people are
Mhm.
important, but you're gonna have to, people need to keep an open mind, be willing to pivot and try new things and don't be afraid
Mhm.
to fail. Like
Mhm.
you can find and experience opportunities and make a decision like, hey, maybe this is me, maybe this isn't me. And
Mhm.
maybe you're trying a bunch of different things at once, and that's okay too. It seems cliche to say follow your heart. But essentially being able to, and I love to talk about the neuroplasticity, right? Like having these new experiences and failing, like
Mhm.
you're just growing your understanding of what's out there. And so I think too, like carving out that time for if you need healing,
Mhm.
do some healing. Like whether you've gone 5 years straight military operations, or you've gone 20 years, or you've gone 30 years,
Mhm.
there's inevitably going to be some point where you're not just soul searching,
Mhm.
but you need to heal, and your family probably needs to heal, right? Because there's a lot that goes on. And it's, I'd say the other thing to add to this, because it is your network. People are important. Um, Family is important. Even acquaintances can be important. It's like, remember these people. There's always, I like to say, like, be always willing to help others and always keep in mind that you can reach out to others too,
Mhm.
right? So, um, and don't be afraid to meet new people. There's a lot of white noise, I guess you could say, and it's stressful to figure out like what's next and this and that, right? Sometimes it's like, eating an elephant one bite at a time.
Mhm.
Sitting down and just very deliberately writing down some ideas, about what's next. You don't have to have an answer,
Mhm.
you don't have to have an answer tomorrow,
Mhm.
but every day taking a few minutes to think about, okay, what about this? What about that? And what are my needs? Possibly what are my family's needs? And how can I support myself amongst all of this, right? Because it's a lot to go from, 20 plus years or however, everyone has their own military story who's coming out of service. And so being able to take some time and focus on that and figure out really like what's next. And there's always going to be pain points. Like nothing's going to be perfect. No matter what you
Mhm.
choose, it's not going to be perfect. So like get the rosy colored glass out, right? But learning, having patience and knowing you're going to fail at something at some point, and just keep trying and find something else and relying on that network. It's really important. And I'll leave it at that.
So you're currently working on a book, The Naturalist Guide to Fort Bragg. Can you tell us what inspired, the project and how that process is going?
Yeah, so this is part of my own healing journey that I like to talk about. When I was leaving, I was about to retire, and I'm like, thinking to myself, I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet. I think I was started to have discussions with Parlay, and that
Mhm.
opportunity was opening up. I had other opportunities too, but I knew I took that leap of faith with Parlay, right? But I spent a lot of time in my healing journey outdoors in my
Mhm.
garden or walking around the parks here and the longleaf pine and really appreciating it and realize like, man, I think this is like one of the first points put like in my life that I've like walked around these areas and I'm not like thinking about where I have to be, what I have to do, what operation I'm about to support, or if I'm training on Fort Bragg, I'm more worried about killing the fake enemy, right? Instead of thinking about like, oh, look, it's wiregrass and all these things, right? And so uh, the book idea essentially came out of my own desire to better understand this local environment and the ecosystem here. You can go to Fort Bragg's website, you can only learn so much. They're going to have,
Mhm.
the hunting regulations, and they're going to have the endangered species branch will at least have some of that on there. But, you know, this book will be an opportunity, and I am not an expert. I always, preface that I am not an expert writing this book. It's more of a, hey, this is a practitioner opportunity. This is all these resources for people to be able to easily understand their opportunities and to learn, right?
Mhm.
So, talk about the what the ecosystems are that are here. We have some very rare species.
Mhm.
Where you can go to safely observe them, so you're not walking around on Fort Bragg impact areas, for instance.
Yeah.
We don't need families doing that. That would not
Mhm.
be very good. Um, and how to get involved,
Mhm.
but and even the aspect of being able to um the benefits of it. There's chemicals that are released from pine trees of all things that are actually beneficial to your immune system. A
Mhm.
lot of people don't know this. Um, you know, and all these other facts that will help support, individuals. They can either reflect on this book and be like, wow, I remember this and that and have fond memories, or just learn more.
Mhm.
Art history in this local area goes back thousands of years. I mean, Buffalo used to roam this area, and people don't know that either, right? And so I'm excited about using that. And earlier I said I actually shoot more with a camera now than I do in weapons, and that's totally true because I'm trying to use 90% of my own photography
Oh,
uh,
wow.
for this book. So that's it's its own patience on my part because I now will go out into the forest and either walk around or sit stationary and wait for animals and creatures to come out. And yeah, the it's its own form of field research.
Mhm.
And I'm super excited about sharing that, right? There's homeowners that also want to know their resources, right? And the
Mhm.
benefits of prescribed burning and all these things. So I will touch on a lot of that to help people navigate their options. So, yeah.
I can't wait till it comes out. You got me excited about Fort Bragg.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like Fort Bragg was excited about this book idea too. Surprisingly, no one's wrote one yet, and
Wow.
Bragg doesn't get the best publicity at times. So,
Yeah.
I think it's the one thing that would be absolutely positive for the area, right? To have
That's
that,
really.
And oddly enough, I'd like to say too, a lot of people don't think of Fort Bragg having some of the most rare species
Mhm.
flourishing in the world, but it does. And it's ironic, right? Because there's a lot of focus on wartime training and
Mhm.
impact areas, right? But oddly, because Fort Bragg is kept so secure and
Mhm.
it's so limited to who can do what on the base, it creates this thriving environment for some of these species, right? Because they'll never have to see a human,
Yeah.
And so, that's one really awesome aspect that I've, learned about and look forward to other people gaining that appreciation for that. So if you stumble across a St. Francis satyr in the forest, which is like a type of butterfly, you'll know exactly what it is. So.
That is very cool. That's exciting. So, Trisha, looking forward, what developments are you most hopeful for about kind of in terms of our digitally empowered future with all this new technology that we're not sure how it's going to turn out?
Yeah, I think that what I've noticed too is that tech still brings people together, which
Yeah.
is really awesome, right? And people, you know, some generations will be judgmental, like, oh, these kids want to stay behind their computers
Yeah.
and not go anywhere. In my older generational voice that I
Mm.
can't do very well. But I think I mean, I still have hope in humanity. Like people are
Yeah.
still connecting. They're just
Mhm.
doing it differently. And I think that like regardless of where that is, if it's in the United States,
Mhm.
people are connecting all around the world. I mean, globalization is like so maxed out right now because of
Yeah.
this, right? You don't have to worry so much about borders stopping people. Like people are gonna connect one way or another, right?
Yeah.
And so like I'm hopeful about that. The ideas and the information that's spreading around, like I think truth conquers.
Mhm.
Like we saw the collapse of the Soviet Union, for instance, right? Like I think truth will continue to shine because of the technology. I know people, like you said, the doom and gloom of technology and AI and this and that, but the truth is still being publicized and can still be used. And I think that even in military operations, that's always the best go-to, right?
Mhm.
Being the first in that narrative and telling that truthful narrative. Hopefully that's what it is, right?
Mhm.
uh, um, will have a huge impact. And so I have faith that that's how things will go one way or another. Can't say that it wouldn't hurt at some point, that we won't have troubles and issues, with technology, but I think ultimately truth will be able to shine in one way or another.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Trisha, for coming on the podcast, sharing your insights, your experiences. I know your contributions to our nation have impacted so many, and I'm just so honored to know you and have had the opportunity to collaborate with you, and can't wait to see all the amazing things you continue to do.
Oh, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, this has been a pleasure today, chatting with you, and reflecting, not just on my career, but also, what's next, and being able to share, hopefully motivate people, one way or another, to follow through with their journey. Don't be scared, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spheres. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think about our future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.